The two films I'll be talking about today are The Sound of Music and The Greatest Showman, and I will be questioning how musicals are critic-proof. The theater, the arts, the rush of people stepping out of normal dialogue to advance the show with saying. Musicals always make people feel nice. The songs, the music, brings warmth to those watching the scenes play out and listen to the soundtrack at home, well, at least for some of us moviegoers. Musical movies in general bring viewers together through the song and dance of the show. If the music is good, the movie doesn't have to be, because people will simply watch it just for those songs. Even if critics dub them as poorly made films and inaccurate to the true story, people will still march through the plot for the songs, even making films classics in the process. The Sound of Music stars Julie Andrews and Christopher Plummer as they tell the story of the Von Trapp family, a small family in Salzburg, Austria, who need a caretaker for the children after the passing of their mother. The nearby abbey sends them a young woman named Maria, who teaches the children how to not be afraid of things and teaches them how to sing. In The Greatest Showman, starring Hugh Jackman and Zac Efron as circus entertainers, with Jackman's character falling in love at a young age with a wealthy woman, and then being with her as they progress in life and start a successful business together, with songs, dance, and everything else in between for the life of a circus owner. When The Sound of Music hit the box office, critics were, critical of it. On the film's first release in 1965, the answer for most critics were a flat no. In the UK Monthly Film Bulletin called the 3-hour tale of a gay mean postulate who gives 7 precocious children and their uptight widowed father the gift of music and affection a, quote, exceedingly sugary experience whipped up from ingredients that might have been bearable if the songs had been better. This was a review of the musical that had won 5 Tony Awards 6 years earlier. The New York Times' Bosley Crowther, dean of mainstream reviews, severely criticized the movie as, quote, cozy cum corny, its characters as fairly horrendous, and Julie Andrews' Maria as always in peril of collapsing under the movie's weight of romantic nonsense and sentiment. In a more measured tone, an anonymous critic from Time magazine wrote that the movie contains too much sugar, too little spice. With inflation taken into account, The Sound of Music is the third highest grossing film of all time, behind Gone with the Wind and Star Wars Episode IV, A New Hope. Even with those terrible reviews, people still flock to the theater to see the Von Trapp family, so much to the point where it is the third highest grossing movie of all time, with inflation. On Rotten Tomatoes, The Greatest Showman has a 56% out of 100% tomato meter, which really isn't a great score, and most movies with this ratings, or a rating similar to it, do not do very well. The Greatest Showman, which was in theaters for 219 days after debuting, with what initially looked like a potentially troublesome $8.8 million over its first 3-day weekend. By looking at that opening weekend to then the film's impressive 19.8 multiplier at closing, The Greatest Showman has one of the largest multipliers ever in box office history. Critics, including the popular YouTube channel CinemaSins, were upset with the movie's inaccuracies about P.T. Barnum's character. In the film, they made him out to be someone who the audience would want to cheer for, even if he did have some slip-ups here and there. In truth, Barnum exploited the people he had in his show and did not make them feel special at all. So you may be asking, how do these movie musicals with mediocre reviews do so well in the box office and continue to grow once closed? The answer is relatively simple. These movies are escapes. Like most movies that are escapes, these have an extra level to it. The critics of both times are honestly 100% correct in saying that these movies were not totally accurate and portrayed very different lives than the ones lived by the characters. But people don't enjoy movies because of facts. They enjoy them because of what they take home with them and the experience that these movies give them while they're watching it. Movie musicals truly have the best way of staying with audience members after the fact that they watch the movies, simply because of the soundtracks. People still sing My Favorite Things when a thunderstorm comes in, and people will continue to sing This Is Me when showing others who they really are. So people who go to see these movies, watch them, listen to the soundtrack, sing it in their car, at work, at home. They tell their friends to go see it, and then they sing with them, and the cycle continues through word of mouth, because people go to see movies if their friends tell them to, more than if a critic says, go see this movie. People sometimes also open more to a realistic fiction movie because the story is based in reality. But when you throw in the songs and the melodies, people continue to connect more to movie musicals than other realistic fiction films. These films really took audiences out of their actual time period and back to a time where things were perfect, but also chaotic. During the 1960s, when the Sound of Music first appeared on the screen, times were pretty tough, especially for Americans during the height of the Civil Rights Movement and assassination of two major leaders, Martin Luther King Jr. and John F. Kennedy. Along with the Vietnam War, the 60s really needed something to brighten people's lives. A film about a family coming together, prehenting one of the worst wars seen in the world, gave people an escape. And even though it may have reminded them of the Second World War with Nazis coming in, it was also a reminder that together we can move past anything and climb any mountain. For The Greatest Showman in 2017, things were not great for most Americans. Not to get too political, but that was mainly because Trump was in office and Mike Pence was the vice president. And not to be too stereotypical, but most people who are going and watching musicals, whether it be on Broadway or on screen, support the LGBTQ+ community, which Pence is an adversary of. The song This Is Me spoke to many people of that community and gave them a voice, not just for those in the community, but also for those that supported them. Both films possess key components of what a good movie musical needs to succeed. Big stars. For The Sound of Music, it was Julie Andrews and Christopher Plummer. For The Greatest Showman, it was Hugh Jackman, Zac Efron, and Zendaya. The two are both technically period pieces since they were made at least 20 years after the stories they were based off of. And both stories have grand romance. In The Sound of Music, that was Maria and Captain Von Trapp. For The Greatest Showman, it was Philip Carlyle and Anne Wheeler, along with a weird love triangle between P.T. Barnum, Charity Barnum, and Jenny Lind. The soundtracks of both films were also written by major musical creators of their era. The Sound of Music's music was written by Rodgers and Hammerstein, who wrote roughly 800 songs together in general. The Greatest Showman's music was written by Pasek and Paul, writers and composers for hits like Dear Evan Hansen, and are becoming a modern-day Rodgers and Hammerstein. Even with big names behind these musical films, critics still didn't want them, but audiences have and will continue to do so. Even though The Greatest Showman did not have the quote-unquote classic title that The Sound of Music or other films like The Godfather, Citizen Kane, or Wizard of Oz have reached, perhaps its run on Amazon Prime or some other streaming or buying service will increase its status despite the critics' initial reviews of it.